say if you want to really be able to hear, it's easier to hear up here, but I'm going to set back a little. Just follow me.
Good afternoon. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is hereby called to order for its regularly scheduled meeting of September 25th, 2024. My name is Tim Rainey, and I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Jeffrey Penzis serves as secretary of the board. Mr. Penzis, may I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Bruce.
Present.
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell.
Present.
Ms. Conrad. Ms. Conrad.
Present.
Mr. Love.
Present.
Vice Chair Savage Selden.
Present.
And Chair Rainey.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established in 1925. The board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinance, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to the enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I'd like to swear in the staff. You remain seated. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, thank you. May I get a motion to approve the meetings from last month?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moving seconds. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Secretary, please provide us with the secretary's report if there is one this month, and then explain the procedure for today's meeting.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As for Secretary's report, there are no announcements this afternoon. The procedure for the meeting will be as follows. I will introduce each case as listed on the agenda. Copies of the agenda can be found at the front podium. For each case, the planner with the Division of Planning and Development will give a presentation. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the applicant will have 5 minutes to present his or her case. After the applicant's presentation, those speakers in support will have a total of 5 minutes. Then those speakers in opposition will have a total of 10 minutes. And then finally, the applicant will have 2 minutes to provide rebuttal. These times do not include time for questions from and answers to members of the board. The chairman may provide additional time provided both sides are given an equal amount of additional time. All parties who wish to provide testimony to the board will be sworn in by the chairman. If an audience member wishes to provide testimony in support of or in opposition to a particular case on today's agenda, he or she will need to fill out a speaker's cards for the record. Speaker's cards are available at the front podium. Once filled out, speaker's cards can be submitted to any DPD staff planner at the left podium. We do not need speaker's cards from the applicants since their names are already part of the record. After all parties have been heard, the board will close the public hearing, make a motion, and then deliberate on the case. If the applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing, or if a board member wishes to hear additional testimony from any party, a 2/3 vote is required to reopen the public hearing pursuant to the board's rules of procedure. Please note that once the public hearing is reopened, both the applicant and opposition will be allowed to provide additional testimony and or rebuttal. All motions by this board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members to approve an application regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also vote to hold an application for a period not to exceed 3 months with the consent of the applicant or 1 month without the consent of the applicant. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, or the UDC, which was adopted by the Memphis City Council and Shelby County Board of Commissioners in August of 2010 and became effective on January 1st, 2011. I will introduce the entire UDC and make it part of today's record, thus dispensing with the reading of individual sections. The board is vested with the power to act on these cases before us today under the provisions of Chapter 9.22 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order and all applicants have been notified of this hearing and all notice requirements have been fulfilled as required by the UDC.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, the board will establish its consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or board member objects to a case being placed on the consent agenda, he or she should do so by a show of hands when the secretary reads that case. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on the consent agenda as a whole, will not hold individual public hearings on each of those cases. Mr. Secretary, which items on our agenda are eligible to be placed on consent this month?
I would first like to note agenda item number 3 and 6 have been withdrawn. Item number 1, BOA 2024-38 at 1523 Kansas Street as a hold for 1 month. Item number 2, BOA 2024-78 at 309 North McLean Boulevard as a hold for 1 month. Item number 4, BOA 2024-83 at 1031 Philadelphia Street as approval with conditions. Item number 5, BOA 2024-84 at 7990 Trinity Road as approval with conditions. Item number 7, BOA 2024-86 at 3573 Sharp Avenue as a hold for 1 month. Item number 8, BOA 2024-88 at 3588 New Horn Lake Road as a hold for 1 month. Item number 9, BOA 2024-89 at 3705 Malco Way as approval with conditions. Item number 10, BOA 2024-90 at 561 Leith Street as approval with conditions. Item number 12, BOA 2024-92 at 3384 Thomas Street as a hold for 1 month. And item number 13, BOA 2024-93 at 540 South Front Street as a hold for 1 month.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. If we could get a motion from the board for the consent agenda, which would be cases 1 and 2 as holds, 4 and 5 approval with conditions, 7 and 8 as holds, 9 and 10 approval with conditions, and 12 and 13 holds.
So moved.
Second.
I want to remind the board by voting on the consent agenda, he or she affirms that he or she has read the staff report and is in full agreement with the conditions. Mr. Secretary, may I get a roll call, please?
Well, let me just say for item number 1, just for the record, that is a client of mine, so I'm recusing myself from voting on it. It's a hold.
Yes.
So I don't know if it matters, but I just want to say that.
So noted.
Perfect. Yeah, so noted.
Mr. Bruce,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Conrad,
Yes.
Mr. Love,
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Selden.
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Rainey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, if you're hearing any of those cases that were just put on the consent agenda, you've either been approved as conditioned by staff or held as requested. And so, Mr. Secretary, if you'll call our first case we're going to hear today.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Item number 11, BOA 2024-91 at 9701 Tracy Road.
Okay, see the applicant, and I have some opposition, so I see applicants coming down. The opposition, if y'all want to be kind of close when we move to that portion of the case. But what we'll do first is hear a staff report to kind of bring us all on the board up to speed on this.
Hello, I'm Latanya Hull of DPD, presenting case BOA 2024-0091. The applicant is Leslie R. Feathers. The representative is Milos Mikic from Whitehead Law. The location is 9701 Tracy Road. And the request is variances to allow a dispatch center as a home occupation and to allow an encroachment into a 20-foot side setback, an encroachment into a required 60-foot front setback, and to allow an accessory structure in the required front yard. On your screen is a vicinity map. The subject property is in pink. To your right, there is a location map, your vicinity map to the right. 84 notices were mailed to residents within 500 feet of the subject property on September the 5th, 2024. A zoning map is in front of you. The property is zoned Conservation Agriculture, CA. And the land uses, the subject property is indicated by the pink star. It is a land use of office, surrounded by both vacant lots as well as residential lots that are indicated by the yellow shaded areas. Across Tracy Road is Tipton County, so this is on the county line. So only the southern part of Tracy Road is included in Shelby County in this project. Above is an area photo of the property. This is an area photo of a portion of the property. The entire property is 14 acres. This is the first 7 acres of the property. It is at the top right is the front portion, which is about 1.5 acres, and it is what I would be referring to as the business/residential area. And at the bottom is the rear part of the property, which is being used primarily for storage of vehicles, and there's a storage shed as well. So these are the two I'm referring to. These are site photos that were taken. The photo to the left top is looking west on Tracy Road into one of the drives on the property. Below that is another view looking directly to what is considered the residence. You can see better here at the top right. Well, this is the rear of the residence. So this is a residential structure here. And this is considered the metal workshop building that's on the site. This is looking directly at the property, just showing the fence line, and this is the metal workshop building behind it. This is the other driveway into the property from the east. It is an asphalt driveway with a gate. And this is just a different view from the east looking at the metal workshop building as well as that entryway. This is a sign here showing ASPAC Asphalt Company. I believe that sign has been since removed, but as of 2023, prior to the enforcement case, there was a sign there indicating that it was an asphalt company. This is a survey provided by the applicant. I've already gone over the layout of the site. Primarily, this is a workshop building. This is a carport. This is what's considered the residence, and this is the storage of equipment and shed area on the property. What I do want to point out about the survey in terms of the physical layout of the site, two of the variances that we're requesting are variances from paragraph 2.7.2a, which states no accessory structure shall extend into the required front or side yards. And so this particular variance is asking for a variance because the workshop is within the 60-foot setback here. It's too far into the front yard. And then the residence, there's supposed to be 20 feet between the property line and the residence, and that is not the case in this property. The other variance related to the physical layout is that no accessory structure shall be located within the front yard. So this workshop building is considered an accessory structure. This is the residence. So per the UDC, this building should not be in front of the residence. It should be somewhere behind the residence, and that's what that variance is. So in looking at the case, staff looked at several primary considerations. Primarily, we looked at the intent and the definition and standards of the UDC accessory home occupation. And the reason that's important is because the applicant is requesting that this use be considered an accessory home occupation. And that's expressly defined in the UDC. So I want to pay a little bit of attention to that. Secondly, I want to look at the actual type of business that we have on this site, which is an asphalt company that is classified by the UDC as a light industrial use. I want to talk about the negative impact on the neighborhood, and we do have opposition present. Now I want to look at the finding of facts pursuant to section 9.22.6 of the UDC. So really quickly, the home occupation is actually considered an accessory structure. It is supposed to be clearly incidental and subordinate to the primary use that's on the site. And in this case, the primary use is a residence. And so this is asking that that business be considered an accessory use to the residence. The other thing that's required is that accessory structures may not involve operations or structures not in keeping with the primary use. So the primary use being a residence, the operation should not be contrary to its use as a residence. And then lastly, as it relates to accessory structure, it may not be of a nature likely to attract visitors in larger numbers than would normally be expected for a residence. And so those are three things that we considered in terms of defining this business as an accessory use. In terms of home occupations, the UDC sets an intent and standards for what should be deemed a home occupation, an accessory home occupation. There are 12 of those standards. In this case, staff has determined that this particular site does not meet 8 of the 12 standards that are required to be met in order to be deemed a home accessory use. So Part A, it specifically lists prohibited home occupations. The applicant is asking for us to approve a dispatch center which is expressly prohibited as a home occupation by the UDC. So it expressly says that we cannot have a dispatch center as a home occupation, but the applicant is asking that we give a variance to that requirement. When we look at the standards, the intent of the home occupation is that it's supposed to be very limited non-residential activity inside a residential dwelling or accessory structure to a residential dwelling. So it's supposed to be not limited, very limited, and it's supposed to be in a residential dwelling or a accessory structure. Such activity does not impact or distract from the residential character of the neighborhood. And in this case, as you see from the site plan and the site photos, the residential aspect of this site is not even apparent. You cannot tell that this is a residence at all. So it does not, in our opinion, meet the actual intent of a home occupation. And lastly, a home occupation shall be deemed an accessory use and no further approval shall be required, provided that the non-residential use, in this case the asphalt building, a business, meets the following. So these are the 8 that they currently do not meet, according to our research. So number 1, the use of the dwelling unit of the home occupation shall be clearly incidental and subordinate to the use for residential purpose. And we've already talked about how you cannot even tell there's a residence on this structure. Every aspect of this property looks commercial. There shall be no change in the outside appearance of the buildings or the premises or other visible evidence of the conduct of a home occupation. So you should not be able to tell that there's a business operating on the subject property. And as you can see from the photos, it's absolutely apparent and dominant that there's a business on this property. No business storage or warehouse of materials, supplies, or equipment shall be permitted outside of the primary dwelling unit. Well, we have a huge storage warehouse in the front. We have a huge plus 3 acre site in the back for vehicle storage, and we have a storage shed. So that is contrary to this particular standard. No equipment or process shall be used that creates excessive noise, vibration, glare, fumes, odors, or electrical interference. And what you'll see later is that this site, according to neighbors, and we have opposition here, and according to our research, this site does produce excessive noise by way of the heavy equipment that enters and operates on the site. It does produce glare from the metal building that's on the site. It does produce odors, asphalt-related odors, and diesel fuel-related odors from the vehicle, according to neighbors, and it creates dust from the vehicles moving across the site. Number 8, operation of the business inside the dwelling unit may not exceed 25% of the first floor area. Now, we did request a floor plan. We did not receive that from the applicant, but if we look at the entire site, clearly the business takes up more than 25% of the buildings that are on the site. No signage should be associated with the building, should be present. Again, there was signage. I believe as a result of the enforcement case, it was removed. And then lastly, adequate parking is available to serve the use. No such parking shall be located in a required front yard. And as we saw from the photos, all of the parking, the entire front yard is paved for parking. And within an existing driveway, driveways shall not be reduced or widened to accommodate the business. And so it does not meet those standards. So according to staff's opinion, this use does not meet what the UDC defines as an accessory home occupation. So what is it if it's not an accessory home use? According to the UDC, this particular type of business is categorized as a light industrial use by the UDC. It specifically says that IH districts, and I've included this realizing this is light industrial, but there is no specific statement of intent for light industrial, so I'm using what it says for heavy industrial, is intended to accommodate high-impact manufacturing, industrial or other uses, including extractive and waste-related uses that by their nature create some nuisance and which are not properly associated with are compatible with nearby residential districts or other less intensive mixed-use or industrial districts. When we look at the light industrial, it says, these are firms engaged in the manufacturing, assembly, repair, or servicing of industrial, business, or consumer machinery equipment, products or byproducts, mainly by providing centralized services for separate retail outlets. But it then goes further to say, contractors and building maintenance services and similar uses perform services off-site. So this is where the particular use comes in. This is an asphalt contracting company that provides services off-site of the subject property. So they come to the subject property, they do what they need to do, and they perform services off-site. And then the conservation and agriculture, which is a zoning district, its intent is to conserve agricultural land and undeveloped natural amenities while preventing the encroachment of incompatible land uses on farmland and other undeveloped areas. And so to the right here, it shows the principal uses that are allowed under light industrial. And if we look at the last, it says contractor storage, including several different types. But at the end, it says storing equipment and materials or perform fabrication or similar work on site. So it talks about these types of services that are contracting services that perform off-site services. So I want to look at the neighborhood impact and the basis for the opposition. So I've recommended rejection on this case. And the reason I've done so is because, number one, I do not believe it meets the definition of a home-based occupation. But it also has a negative impact on the neighborhood. So one of the things that is not supposed to happen in a home-based occupation is that it's not supposed to have continuous noise. And so the complaints I'm getting from neighbors is that the heavy machinery and the vehicles that operate on the site cause lots of noise from the diesel operation of these vehicles on the site. There are unsightly industrial buildings. If you look at this picture at the top, this is a picture from one of the neighbors' front door. This is the building that he sees outside of his front door. This is an image of another neighbor, and they can see the top of that same building from their property as well. Asphalt smells, building glares. So this is specifically stated as a nuisance for industrial uses. And as you can see from these pictures here on our screen provided by neighbors, this is a neighbor's front yard. His front door, I mean. And so he has indicated that he cannot sit in his front room because of this extreme glare coming from this building most of the morning. And this is sent on 2 different days. And then also the heavy dust from the equipment, as well as the inability to sell their homes. We have a neighbor, and I've put a picture here of the home on Zillow, that she's been trying to sell over a year. And I received notification from her realtor that has stated that she has missed out on at least 3 sales, potential buyers who have specifically stated that the reason they will not buy the property is because it's next door to an asphalt company. And so it's preventing her from being able to sell her $615,000 house on a 20-acre lot. And then neighbors indicate that the subject property has never been used as a residence and no one is there overnight. So there's question about whether the home is actually being used as a residence or has historically been. So again, this case is a response to a zoning enforcement case. Our zoning officers went out to the site, took photos in 2024, and I just wanted to show some of the heavy equipment that's coming out. And so these are 4 different pieces of equipment that are coming from the site at least 2 times, maybe 3 times a day, leaving the site, coming back at least in the evening time, potentially even coming back lunch hours or other times during the day. And these are other photos that give you a closer sense of the buildings with some of the equipment parked in the front and some of the units that are stored there. So staff finds that this site exhibits no extraordinary characteristics that create a practical difficulty or undue hardship on the applicant to follow the UDC's accessory home occupation standards. The applicant states that the property displays extraordinary narrowness that poses a significant challenge in reverting this to residential use. I do not agree with that. The property is in pink, and if we look at the uses around it, the ones that are actually not vacant, so the yellow ones are residential. All of these residential lots are much narrower than the subject lot. When I took a measurement of all of these here, and I did try to get the narrow ones here, I didn't include this one because it's not really considered narrow, it's pretty wide. But when we look at the ones that are here, the average width of those lots are 150 feet, while the subject property's lot is 240 feet wide. So it's not narrow compared to the other residential uses in the area. In addition to that, these narrow residential uses are able to put homes on these lots. They have homes on these lots. And I counted one of them that was almost 100 feet wide. One of the houses was 100 feet wide. So you can absolutely use that particular lot for residential uses. So in conclusion, I've stated most of this, so I won't read this, but the applicant is requesting to be considered a home occupation. They're asking for variances from 8 of the 12 standards, as well as a variance from the intent, as well as a variance from at least 2 of the accessory structure requirements. They submitted this application in response to an enforcement case in February 2024, but the applicant previously received a citation for this exact same use in 2019. They were given a courtesy citation in 2019 for the same violation of operating this asphalt company and for storing vehicles on site, and at that time for having a sign. But they continued to illegally operate this business at the location. So that's where we are today with the second zoning enforcement case. So staff received letters of opposition, and opposition will speak with the considerations we mentioned. And staff finds that the request is not in harmony with the purpose and intent of the UDC. The granting of the variance will cause substantial detriment to the public good. It will substantially impair the intent and purpose of an adopted plan or the UDC, and it will be injurious to the neighborhood and the general welfare. Now, lastly, I recommended rejection, and I did want to quickly address the applicant's proposed conditions, because the applicant did submit a letter of intent, and within that letter of intent, there are some conditions that they wanted us to consider to put on the case. I chose not to condition the case because the applicant is asking to be considered a home occupation, and I do not believe that there are any conditions that we can place on this site that would make it fall in line with the intent of the accessory home occupation use. And so that's why I did not offer any conditions. So if I look at these really quickly, the applicant believes that the home-based business is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood because there are abutting properties that have these huge metal buildings. And in this case, one of the metal buildings, which is this one here, is in a different county. It's in Tipton County. So I'm not really going to address that. But if we look at the neighboring one that they reference, NCA, there is not a limit on metal buildings like there are in some of the other residential uses. You can have a lot of metal buildings. Here, I think what's important to note is that this building is behind the residence like it's supposed to be according to UDC. And in addition to that, it's not operating a business, a light industrial business. This is more about not just the site, but the use on the site that's not compatible with the residential use on the building. They are asking that we consider the following conditions. A masonry wall with stucco finish at least 9 feet high. Currently, if you look at this picture, and it's kind of hard to see, but if you look at this photo here, there is a fence on the site. It is a 6-foot fence right here on the side of this truck. This is a neighboring property. That's 6 feet. A 9-foot fence would do nothing to shield this building from the neighbor. So I do not believe that that condition will serve any real purpose in terms of addressing the impact that this building is having in the community. The second is pavement on the site shall be removed and sodded. That will address some of the issue related to this not resembling a residence and the parking issue, because currently the entire site is paved. So by adding some sod, you give it a softer look. It looks a little bit more residential because you have grass, but given the buildings, their material, their sizes, the other operations that's happening on the site, it still will not make this look residential. And even the width of the pavement that's left is still in violation of one of our standards, which means that the driveway cannot be wider than expected for a residential use. So again, I do not think that that's going to have any real effect on what we're trying to achieve here. New fencing connecting the residence and the carport shall be added. A gate shall be added. The purpose of the fencing is so that they can shield the parking for the employees, which happens currently in front of the site. My assumption is that they're going to move the employee parking back here behind the residence. You know, that would definitely help shield some of the cars on the site from sight. Then a gazebo and other building apertures. And they also even say that they want approval to be able to add other agriculture and livestock purposes. So, in close, I just do not believe that any of these conditions or that there are any conditions that we could put on this particular subject property and the use to make it conform to the home-based business criteria. That is the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for staff? All right, if the applicant will come forward. for the record.
Yes, Miloš Mikic,
Hot mics.
275 Jefferson Avenue, Whitehead Law, not an attorney.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to thank you guys for having me here today to present. I'm joined by my colleague, Josh Whitehead. I'm joined by Ms. Leslie Feathers and her family of employees that work at ASPAC. I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. This staff report is not good for us. The presentation was possibly worse. But as I read this staff report again and again and again and again, what I realized is that it was egregiously omissive. Next slide, please. We all know that 9.22.6, the whole reason I can come before you guys to present, is that there has to be an exhibited extraordinary feature that imparts upon the owner a hardship or practical difficulty. Next slide. The only time this shape has been helpful for me is when I play Tetris, okay? Now, when I'm looking at this shape, I thought it was weird that it wasn't closed at the top left and that it kind of overran on the top right. And then I realized that someone went out of their way to draw this box to look like the subject property in the staff report. Next slide. So I went to the zoning atlas, and I'll show you what the box showed, which is right here. Over half of the box isn't shown on page 4 of the staff report. The dimensions, the width is talked about, 240, but 2,500 feet isn't talked about. On top of that, a lot of, go back one, Josh. In the presentation, she talked about how those properties underneath, well, they have residential stuff on it. Most of those parcels are owned by the same person, and the house that's for sale that has a similar shape is having trouble selling. Next slide. So here, again, the subject property is wider than most residential properties. That word residential, it's just a little bomb that gets dropped throughout the entire staff report to taint it into feeling like this is a residential district. This is a conservation agricultural district. And again, no mention of the depth. Next slide. So again, 9.22.6a, exceptional narrowness, exceptional shape, the strictest interpretations of the UDC, we hit both of those. Next slide. Pending legal action. That sounds pretty terrible. So terrible, in fact, that I called Ms. Feathers and I said, do you know anything about this? And she didn't. It's environmental court. I'm not an attorney, and I can represent Ms. Feathers and ASPAC at environmental court. But pending legal action taints it in such a way that it looks really, really serious. Next slide. So, with the Conservation Agricultural District, the use is allowed by right. A trailer park, raising animals, slaughtering poultry, auctioning livestock, a horse stable, farm labor, sale of agricultural products, timber harvesting, those are not things that are conducive to a residential district. Next slide. The residential use of the property is not apparent at all on the site. This is from the analysis on page 16. Next slide. Well, that's a barn dominium. Yes, it doesn't belong in Central Gardens, but this isn't Central Gardens. This is the Tipton County, Shelby County line. I want a barn dominium. Next slide. The business detracts from the neighborhood's residential, that word again, and agricultural character. Next slide. Well, there's our barn. Next slide. There's a barn right across the street that it's in Tipton County. That somehow matters. Next slide. There's one a little bit further back off to the side. Yeah, it's screened. Next one. Right next door, there's another barn. What is more agriculturally characteristic than a barn? Next slide. Additionally, adjacent residents indicate that the subject property has never been used as a residence. Next slide. This is some of the limited correspondence that I had with staff. How long has the building been used as a residence? It's been used as a dwelling since 1998. Who lives in the residence? Ricky Sanders, foreman, 1 year. Not mentioned in the staff report. Next slide. The dwelling was built in 1996. Ms. Feathers resided there from 98 to 2008, and then again, 2021 to 2023. 2021 to 2023, horrific divorce, $300,000 in legal fees, and a battle with cancer. In between 2008 and 2021, what she allowed that residence to be was a home for any of her employees that were down on their luck because construction's tough and needed a place to stay. Not in the staff report. Next slide. Luckily, she was able to find some pictures, she lost most of them in the divorce, of proof that she lived at 9701 Tracy Road. She also has her driver's license with it, a gun permit with that address. Next slide. According to the applicant, there are as many as 12 employees not residing in the residence who are engaged in the company and come to the site. Next slide. Another one of my responses. Number of staff on site, 1 to 12. 12 being incredibly rare. On average, 3 to 5, if anyone needs to be at the shop. She said that every day, 2 times a day, sometimes 3, people coming and going. When it rains, they're not working. When it's the winter, they're not working. Most weekends, not working. When they are on a big job, they are not coming back and forth. Their equipment stays on the job. None of that added into the staff report. Next slide. Here at the end, what I just want to show here is we're land use and zoning people. We understand that when the assessor of property gives you a commercial classification, that doesn't mean that you're commercially zoned. But that's the pool that we play in. The only thing that Leslie knew was that she gets taxed 50% more. Did she confuse zoning with the assessor of property? It's not really that unlikely for that to happen. And what happened in 2019, shortly after, again, COVID, horrific divorce, cancer. With that, I would like to save the rest of my time for what I was hoping to actually talk about, instead of finishing the staff report, is to address the concerns of the neighbors.
Is there anybody else that's going to speak in favor right now, or are we just going to reserve time?
Reserve time.
Okay, and then how much did we have?
3 minutes.
343 reserved, so that'll be 543. All right, I have 3 oppositions here. Do you want me to call a name, or do y'all have an order you want to come up? How about Mr. Wainwright? Yeah, we're going to the opposition. As you come up, if you'll state your name and address for the record. Sure, I'll swear you.
My
both
wife,
in together.
Karen.
Guess this is Mr. and Mrs. Wainwright?
Yes.
Okay. If you'll give your name and addresses for the record, please.
My name's Patrick Wainwright. I live at 9645 Tracy Road, which is the property to the west.
Okay,
And I'm Karen Wainwright, and I live in
Same place, okay.
9645 Tracy Road.
all right, do y'all swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead and share it with us.
So I want to start off, I have 2 corrections to the letter that I submitted for opposition. In the letter, the first paragraph, it said that we've been living there for 14 years. We moved in 2014. We've been there for 10 years. We bounced back and forth with several drafts and ended up including the wrong information on that, so I apologize for that. And I have a second correction. The big building, the one that everybody's talking about, did go up in 2019 to 2020 timeframe. In the answer that they submitted, they said that it was just like all of the other neighbors' buildings, and cited the one across the street. The one across the street went in after the big building, so you can't use it as a reason when it actually was subsequent to the construction. So those are the 2 corrections. It states specifically that the site was substantially improved. If you look at the aerial photo, the only improvements that have ever been done are to support the paving operations of ASPAC. It said that it was extraordinarily narrow. It's an interpretation, but it's not too narrow to have a 7-acre paving operation. So I kind of take umbrance with that. It says in their application that there was no detriment to the public good. Sir, ladies and gentlemen, it's only if you don't live next door to it. It's definitely a detriment to us. It's definitely a detriment to Miss Hayes. She can't sell her house, and God forbid if we get ready to sell our house. I'm terrified of what will happen. So if you look at the site, it used to be about 1.5 acres of what was paving operations. Now it's 7 acres. They're putting up new buildings. They say, oh, well, we're trying to make it all better. So they're putting up new buildings and they're making it better for their paving operation again. So I walk out my front door and I see a 4,200 square foot shop. That's what I get to look at from my front door. This is my dream house. So we're here today because the zoning and UDCs and the UDCs and zoning directions were developed to make sure this exact thing doesn't happen. It protects the property owners in a neighborhood to make sure this type of activity is not allowed. My wife and I have been married 44 years. We worked for 44 years to be able to buy this home we live in. It's our dream house. You know, and if y'all approve this ordinance or this variance, it's gonna be a nightmare. You know, they're already expanded to 7 acres. If y'all approve this, there'll be 15 acres within a couple of years. And we won't get a plug nickel for our house. So my wife is probably going to say a couple of things as well. Mm-hmm. So, but I want to thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Wainwright.
Hi, my name is Karen Wainwright. Okay, so what I wanted to bring up is in 2019, when they put up that giant building, okay, everyone was panicking, worrying about dying of COVID. So nobody paid as much attention as they should have. We thought they already had clearance. But now we get this letter saying that on the approved site plan, I didn't know it had already been approved. And yet they're already they put up a gazebo. We call it a smoke pit because that's where all the employees get to go to smoke now. And they're putting sod down. That's to make their storefront look better when they turn it into a full-blown concrete business, which is what's happening. And the only thing I see is people scrambling to get a variance for business zoning for their once residential homes so that when they widen Tracy Road, they can sell their property as a business for all the traffic that's going to be coming in and out, because I fear that's next. This is a cancer that started growing without approval. And now they want to do it's easier to get forgiven than it is to get permission routine and stick it to the rest of us that actually live on our properties. Thank you. And Ms. Hall, we agree with her wholeheartedly, and you did a fantastic job. Thank you.
Okay, hold on one second. Are there any questions for the Wainwrights?
Yes. I'm sorry.
All right, y'all are good.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Yeah. What about Ms. Nisby?
Hello,
Your
my
name
name
and address, yeah.
Veronica Nisby, and I live at 5150 Malgery Run Cove, but my parents live next door at 10099 Tracy Road.
Okay, do you swear to, and are both y'all gonna talk?
Yes.
If you'll give your name and address too, ma'am.
Diane Hayes, 10099 Tracy Road.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, go ahead, ladies.
My parents bought their land 1988. I was a senior in high school and hated it, did not want to move to the country. My dad grew up out there, and it was always his dream to buy land and go back and build a house. My parents built their dream house. We've had great memories, big family parties. Of course, now that I'm older, I realize the value of the property and being able to have space and own land and just being able to share those memories with my family. Back in 1994, I think my mom saw some of the buildings going up, kind of questioned it, and asked, hey, what's going on? Is this a company? No, it's not a company. Nobody, she called code enforcement. Nobody did anything, nothing happened. Now we're here in 2024. My dad's health is failing. He has really bad asthma, along with some other ailments. And you can imagine with having heart conditions, asthma, the smells, the sounds, realizing that you may have to leave your dream and you can't do it because nobody wants to live next door to an asphalt business. Even after this has been reported, there's been a whole lot of activity, as my other neighbors had said. There was gravel or the asphalt that was being taken up and grass being put down to make it look like it's residential. Even in one of the pictures that the attorney just showed with the playground thing there, if you look at the picture closely, there are parking spaces in front of you can see the lines and the little blocks so that you don't go up too far. It is a business, it's an eyesore, and it's ruining for people that have worked hard to build homes in an agricultural area so that they can enjoy the wildlife. On the fence part where our property connects to their property, where they're washing off the trucks, there's been drainage, I guess from the oil or whatever those chemicals are that has killed the grass, the flowers, and there's nothing else like this on that part of Tracy Road. It's all residential homes, people that have had dreams of building a home on acreage, the wildlife that's out there. I mean, that's what people moved out that way for. I'm asking that you please deny their request and let this still continue to be a beautiful, a natural site for people that moved out and built their dream homes. Thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Diane Hayes. I just like to say, would any of you guys like to live next door to this? That's why I can't sell my property. Thank you.
Are there any questions for these ladies? All right, thank you very much.
I got a question.
Oh, wait, real quick.
Just a quick, what's the proximity for your location to the location in question? Is it?
My parents stay next door.
Okay.
They're next door. That fence that they showed in the picture, that's their fence.
All right, thank
You
you.
said y'all are to the west?
If you're looking at the property, it would be west, that fence that's on the west side.
Okay.
So they've seen all the activity, of course, all the trucks going in and out. My dad likes to sit outside and watch the deer early in the morning. Of course, if you have all the noise and stuff that's coming from the trucks, you're not going to be able to enjoy that. And that's not what the property, that's not what the area is zoned for.
This is a Hayes' house, right here.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you, appreciate you.
Thank y'all. Is there anybody else here to speak in opposition before we move back to the applicant with rebuttal? All right, we'll move to rebuttal. We have 5 minutes and 43 seconds.
I'd like to thank the opposition for coming out. I know it's a long drive. I was out there Sunday. It is gorgeous. Going back to the Conservation Agricultural District, it's kind of unreasonable to believe that large lots in that district are going to be exclusively used for residential purposes. Again, going back to that list of things that are allowed by right, don't want to go back over it, but just leaving that thought out there. Next slide. So here we have the Hayes House. That's currently 615. It was listed for 719. If you look at some of the houses that are relatively close, it's the most expensive house on the block, and that's a tough place to be. When we're looking externally for a reason that might be, ASPAC is the easy one. I mentioned that Tipton County is right across the street. Taxes are lower in Tipton County. There's probably a pretty small pool of people that are looking for a site that big, a house that big. There's a lot of different reasons that play into it, and I just don't believe that ASPAC is going to be the only reason as I continue going into this. Next slide. So here you can see there's a couple of houses that sold for 500. Most of them are a lot lower than that. Again, it's just hard to be the most expensive house on the block. Next slide. Mr. Hayes, home-based roofing business. Ms. Feathers utilized his service. He's utilized hers. In fact, when this property was purchased, it was a dumping ground. It was a dumping ground, and there was a lot of roofing materials in the back. Next slide. Here's a work that was done by ASPAC for the Hayes, December 18th, 2003, and then again in 2020. So this is a neighborly relationship that's gone on for 21 years. Wasn't an issue until they tried to sell the house. Next slide. Parking is overtaken the site as there's no grass to distinguish for residential front yard. Next slide. If staff would have communicated with us, we could have sent them this picture. This is what it looks like now. The smell of asphalt, there's no asphalt on this site. They don't bring asphalt here every day or take asphalt with them from this site. The smell of asphalt is because they did that improvement. A lot of the dust that's been showing up lately is from that improvement. Next slide. As far as the constant noise that's going on, I've already covered how much time they don't spend on this site. What you're looking at is Tracy Road and Highway 14. They are expanding Highway 14. It's loud. You see 2 dump trucks here, an excavator and a bulldozer. That goes on all day. That is not coming from ASPAC. Next slide. So next slide. These are the revised conditions. Our site plan was omitted from the staff report. What we have here, these are things that we believe are going to address the neighbors' concerns. Josh is going to pass these out. Number 1, that's going to correlate to the first condition, is a new 8-foot fence. Now, staff said that an 8-foot fence there wouldn't cover anything. That part of the parcel actually slopes up. So even though it's an 8-foot wood fence, it might be 9, 10 feet, depending on where that elevation they put it. That would be for the Wainwrights, then also down there at the bottom for the Hayes. Number 2, that new sod. Most of that's already been put in. Number 3, that was weed grass that they pulled up and put new sod down. Number 4, a new gate that's completely screened that would be closed during business hours so you can't see in. Number 5, new fencing to have the residents be completely screened from the rest of that part of the property. Number 6 is the repaving. That's already been done. Number 7, new gazebo, that's been built. Number 8, with the chickens, we're not talking about slaughtering chickens or anything like that. She's just talking about her and her family having some chickens to have eggs. Plenty of people do it. Number 9, to make sure that dust isn't a problem, repaving whatever's left. I think they said 80 tons of asphalt to make sure no dust is popping up. Number 10, the roof, that glare. The sun does come over right over that building, but even on top of that, we want to paint the roof because we're good neighbors. When trees fall and branches fall, the neighbors have called ASPAC to use their equipment to come move it. ASPAC has never said, well, it's in your property, we don't care who's... No, they just go do it because it's rural Tennessee and they're neighborly. Next slide. So over $1 million in improvements have been made. And that's why the omissions in the staff report kind of bother me, because to move this, you lose the improvements, you need maybe a few more $1 million to get this done. I just wanted the full picture of what this looks like. This looks pretty residential, pretty gorgeous back here. Go to that last picture, Josh. You can see where everything is stored is in the far back of the property and completely screened by the woods. And so we believe that the site plan and the conditions that we came up with adequately cover all of the concerns of the neighbors. And if they feel that they don't, we are more than willing to continue working on those to find a solution. And we also have, aside from the letters of opposition, we have almost 3 pages of support signatures. And with that, that wraps up my presentation.
All right, are there any questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
As far as, now, when you're saying heavy equipment, how many trucks are usually either housed on the property, and then how often do they?
So how many dump trucks? 3? So 3 dump trucks, those are gonna be like the bigger ones. Those are the ones that are housed way in the back, so you can't even see where they house them back behind that lake. So there'd be 3 dump trucks, and a few pickup trucks, Some of those machines, I call them Zambonis, that would kind of grade everything down. Now, the big thing that I really wanted to point out is that they don't come to this site every morning, grab this equipment, go out, and then come back that night. What will end up happening is, say they have like a big project they're working on, they'll go pick up their gear, they'll go out to the site, they'll work on the site. If it takes 3 weeks, that equipment stays out there for 3 weeks. Now, say the equipment did break down, they needed to repair it, yes, then it would come back down. But it's not in every day at 8 a.m. they're there, every day at 8:30 they're leaving, every night at 5 they're there, every night at 5:30 they're leaving.
Are any equipment repaired on that property, or do they carry it somewhere else?
Since the repair is pretty expensive, they try to do the repairs that they can handle inside that barn.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, you put up a list of uses that are permitted in a conservation agricultural district.
Yes.
And none of them, I think, fit what you're doing. What type of use do you have that you're saying fits or is allowed in a conservation agricultural district?
When we think about the agricultural districts, where one of the, I wanted to point this out. So asphalting is not the same thing as landscaping, and I understand that. A lot of the landscaping materials that you can use, a lot of the trucks that you can use, they are permitted. And so when I look at that, that would be a close one. When I look at some of the things that are allowed with the livestock animals, that's going to require heavy equipment, big equipment. Right here. So livestock auctioning, you're going to have trucks coming in and out full of animals. They don't walk the cows there, the horses there. Farm, labor, that's big equipment using that. Timber harvesting, that's going to be large equipment to cut those trees down, bring them in and out. Sale of agricultural products, you got to have that product on site. Those are big trucks coming and going. So when I think about it in that regard, everything that I just mentioned has a lot of trucks coming and going, and quite frankly, probably more often than what ASPAC is doing right now. Because there is no asphalt material on site. They don't mix asphalt, they don't do anything of that. It really just is the storage and dispatch.
And let me give you a chance to respond to this. I'm looking at that list. Most of the things listed there seem to relate to agriculture. Okay, and what you're doing is not agricultural. Do you have any thoughts on that distinction, or is that a distinction that's not worth focusing on?
I wouldn't say it's not worth focusing on. I just think more of the activity of what's happening on that property and how it affects that property. And I don't see that we would negatively impact that property any more or less than what some of the more agricultural uses are currently.
Okay, thank you.
What do you consider exceptional about this property? It's 14 acres. Is it that it's too big or that it's too
It's
narrow?
14 acres and the depth of it and how wide it is. You have that lake in the front. So to be able to restore this to a residential place, I mean, again, the house next door, say ASPAC isn't there and that original asking price of $719 is still on there. That's just the amount of people. It's a beautiful house. I'm not saying that it's not worth that, but the amount of people who have the ability to purchase that is very, very small.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm not sure who it goes to. Now, are we saying, I'm on the land use map, are we saying it has been designated as office, or am I just colorblind? Is it color industrial? I guess I'm looking on the iPad. And it's showing kind of.
That's the current land use.
Okay.
Per our GIS map. That's what it indicates its use is.
Office.
Office.
But we're categorizing this use more as a light industrial? Is that
The UDC characterizes that activity that's occurring on that site as light industrial.
And I think what the applicant was saying is that in the tax records, it shows it commercial. But that's how they're taxing it, is as commercial. That's not necessarily the zoning designation that shows on the assessor site.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Josh Whitehead, 275 Jefferson Avenue. I was on the assessor's website this morning, and it classifies it, yes, as commercial, but when you specifically drill down, it finds that the dwelling has an office component. And I think that office component is what colored that map pink.
Gotcha. Thank you.
How big is the dwelling on there?
1,200 square feet.
And then how much is office as opposed to you got a barn dominium that faces the rear, I guess?
Within the actual barn dominium, it's mostly residential.
A 12 by 12.
So you have to say your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Leslie Feathers.
Give your address.
9701 Tracy Road.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Feathers.
So a 12 by 12 little small room in there is used has a desk in it.
Okay, that only the 12 by 12 the office.
Correct.
The rest.
Yes.
Okay.
It's someone is living in it and has been for a while.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
I have just a quick question, just so I can make sure I understand. So the actual use of this site, since you're not using it to create asphalt or grind up asphalt, what is the actual use of the site? Is it strictly just for storage of equipment?
Literally strictly for storage.
Storage of what specifically?
We have 3 dump trucks, a few trailers, and some tractors.
Any material?
There is no material on site, unless we're actually bringing it there to work there to fix it up, There's none stored there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. May I just respond to a couple of comments by the applicant? I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. First, the applicant mentioned my mention of legal action pending. That is the actual classification for the citation in our system. So when you look at the zoning citation that was provided to the applicant, the current status is listed as pending legal action. And so that's why that's what's indicated in the staff report, that's the current status, meaning it is in court or some legal procedure. So that's not my language, that's the status in our system. The applicant also mentioned my use of residential. While I'm aware this is conservation agriculture, the applicant is asking for us to consider this a home occupation. The use on that lot is residential. So I'm comparing the use on that particular lot, which is residential, which has to be residential in order for this to even be considered a home occupation, to the other residential properties in the neighborhood. I don't see any value in comparing that residential property to others that are being used for conservation agriculture. We're talking about a residential subject property that wants to be considered a home occupation. And so that's why I make reference to residential as the use, because that's the primary use that's required on the site. Also, I want to mention that in terms of the noise that's on the site, I know the applicant mentioned the construction work happening elsewhere, but our zoning enforcement has gone out to the site multiple times. And after speaking with our zoning enforcement, they have indicated the intensity of the use. They have indicated the frequency of the vehicles coming off the site. I've talked to them about the noise from the diesel vehicles coming off the site. So, and the residents are also talking about specifically the noise of the vehicles on the site. And I believe there's another piece of machine that might be attached to the workshop that seems to make some noise as well. So we're not talking about, I am not, zoning enforcement is not talking about the noise that's being off-site for that construction. We're talking about specific noise that's being generated on that subject property. And I just want to clarify that.
And Mr. Chairman, I can't promise that we'll have the whole ASPAC family with us in 1 month, but we filed this as a home occupation based upon a pre-application conference that we had. If the issue and the disconnect is mainly the request that we made, there's a world in which we could refile, rephrase this as a use variance, and maybe get past some of this hurdle that we're having with staff. And if that would help the dialogue between the neighbors and the staff, then we would respectfully request a 30-day hold.
My comment to that, I'm having a lot of trouble with home occupation on this. Like non-starter kind of trouble with it. So if that's something that you feel would be.
Let me clarify. We request a 30-day hold, period.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Is there somebody on the board that would like to make a motion for a 30-day hold?
So moved.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
The purpose of this hold is to just refile it as just a variance and take out the hold.
Do a different variance.
So it's a different approach for approval.
Different approach, yeah.
Okay, second a hold.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, held for 30 days. Thank you all very much. Yeah. All right, Mr. Secretary, you call our next case we're going to hear.
Item number 14, BOA 2024-62 at 1360 Carr Avenue.
No. We took a case that we can look this Yeah, please do it. But yeah, that's more important. Okay, thanks. This is the car case. So. Oh no, it was that whole second row almost. 14. Thank you. Oh, wait, yeah. Position 4. Okay. Yeah. So it was just those two. I think it was in the middle. They were all employees. Yeah.
So I was like, I think every signature on there is fine.
Yeah.
Just 2 minutes. I can understand sending this back, coming back to the
All right, sorry, we got one person that had the emergency phone call real quick, so give us just a second on that to kind of. Hey, Jeffrey. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see, Mr. Pentis, will you call our next case for, or we've already called the case, right? So applicant's present. Let's see, give me 1 second. Mr. Christian, you want to give us a staff report or update us on any changes or anything?
Sure. Chloe Christian, DPD. I'll give a brief overview of this case, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they come up later. So what's before you is a rehearing of case number BOA 2024-0062. This is a use variance to allow a large home at 1360 Carr Avenue. As a reminder, this was rejected by this body 2 months ago. Here's a location map of the property. It's in the Midtown area. It's zoned residential single-family 6 with the Central Gardens historic overlay and residential corridor overlay. The land use designation on the land use map is single-family, but you'll notice there are some multifamily units in the nearby vicinity as indicated by the brown on the map. Here are some photos of the subject property. These are the plans submitted by the applicant. On the left-hand side are the current plans, and the right-hand side shows the proposed plans. Note the existing shed or accessory unit in the rear is proposed to be demolished and used for rear parking, as well as a few other exterior improvements. These are the floor plans. Once again, to the left is the existing and the right is the proposed floor plan. This was found to be consistent with the Memphis 3.0 general plan. The land use designation on the future land use planning map is anchor neighborhood mix of building types, which would support a fourplex unit. So for a brief overview of what's going on, like I said, this variance was rejected during the July meeting by this body. The applicant filed a request for a rehearing of this, which was heard on August 14th, and this body voted to rehear this, which is what is happening now. The home was originally built as a single-family home. However, at some point between 1952 and 2018, it was converted illegally into multiple dwelling units without the proper permits filed. So staff finds that this use of a large home has predated the ownership of the applicant and has existed without causing any detriment to the public good. Also, the property has remained vacant and in poor condition for over a year, so staff finds that this request is an opportunity to activate the property to be used in the way that it's been used historically for several years now. The request was found to be consistent with the future land use goals of the 3.0 plan, which is an adopted plan that we use to guide decisions made related to land use. However, I will note that the Tennessee Code annotated does state that variance requests can be inconsistent with the long-range general plan. Lastly, the existing compatibility of the multifamily uses with single use can be seen on the land use map as seen earlier, and there are existing triplexes and quadplexes that are in the general area. Originally, staff did recommend approval with a few conditions to increase compatibility with the UDC in regards to parking and landscape screening along property lines. Conditions would also allow for this subject property to undergo the COA process to ensure adherence with the design and style guidelines of the Central Gardens Historic District. However, for this rehearing case, staff recommends to take whatever action this body deems advisable. And that concludes my presentation, but I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Christian? Not at this time. All right, if the applicant will come forward. And Mr. Falk, if you give your name and address for the record.
William Falk, 200 Running Brook Lane.
Okay, and you're representing as an attorney, so I'm not going to swear you in. You're already an officer of the court, so go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. As you know, my name is William Falk, and I represent Oro Investments regarding the variance request for the subject property, 1360 Carr Avenue, as we all know, in Central Gardens. This home is currently in a very dilapidated state, has been neglected, but otherwise is in a fantastic neighborhood. Oro Investments is a general partnership that was founded and based in the Memphis area. It's made up of Mr. Juan Carpio, who has been a resident of Memphis for a number of years, and David May, who is a lifelong Memphian. Next slide, please. I'd like to briefly touch on the history of the ownership here. Oro Investments purchased in 2024 from Paradigm 21 Capital. At that time, Oro Investments was not aware of any previous use dispute. This home, as Ms. Christian said, at some point in the distant past, or at many points over a period of time, was converted into a multifamily, total of 8-unit apartment complex consisting of a 6-unit main, oh yes, and I did have some literature for you all, of a 6-unit main structure with a 2-unit rear structure. And I wanted to clarify that is not a utility shed in the back. It is a very rundown, dilapidated 2-unit apartment complex that is slated to be destroyed to make room for this parking, as well as to remove the eyesore and potential problems that can come with a building that's falling apart. Next slide, please. A little bit of the rental history. There's been some contention that this building was never rented to the public at large, that it was solely rented to friends and family of the Ritchie family. However, and Chloe, if you move through a couple, as you can see here, we have evidence of advertisements taken in both the Commercial Appeal and the Memphis Press Scimitar dating back to 1940. We have included enhanced versions that show advertisements from 1940, 52, 55, 73, 81, 82, 2000, and 2002, ending with this, what we believe is a outdated listing for the property for at least 2 of the units from 2021. Next slide, please. Further, within the main home, we have 6 individual units with a deadbolting door, each containing at least 1 bedroom, at least 1 bathroom, and each having its own kitchen, or the remnants of a kitchen. Next slide, please. In no particular order, these are 3 of the kitchens. If you notice the middle, there's the gas line there that an appliance would have connected to. Next slide. And then these are the other 3 kitchens that are found in the property. Next slide. The electrical in this house is a bit of a mystery to me. We have 3 units as well as to be frank, I'm really not entirely sure what to call all of this, but I can tell you that it needs work. Next slide, please. Just wanted to include a couple miscellaneous photos here, and there are more supplemental photos contained in the binders. But what we have on the left is a vine that is growing through the property. Nature has already begun its attempt to reclaim the property, which is another reason that this is so important to get this project going. Next slide. Oro Investments has already received at least 2 approvals, unless I'm reading that incorrectly, at least 2 certificate of appropriateness approvals for the demolition of the secondary structure, parking, rear window and door siding of the home, as well as landscaping and pathway reconfiguration in the front. The removal of this hazardous and decrepit structure in the rear not only serves to improve the property, remove a potential hazard, and can only serve to improve the property values of not just this home, but the surrounding homes. Next slide. As you see here, this is our exterior site plan. We have, with that rear structure removed, there are at least 4 parking spaces, and on the rear of the home, this does not necessarily need to be parked right behind the other vehicle. There is ample space. I can attest personally, I visited the property yesterday, walked through. There is ample space to have those cars next to each other, as well as in the bottom right corner, another vehicle could be parked there, still out of the way of the gate. There are 2 public street parking spots in front of the home, as well as plans for a 5x bike rack, which will be compliant with the 7 parking space requirement. Next slide, please. This is a more detailed rendering of the property, just to give a better idea of what we're looking at. This includes a green space, communal area in the rear of the home. Next slide. This is a close-up of this green space, another area in which people can congregate and continue to bond and form a sense of community. We have the interior layout, and I believe we had a little bit of a miscommunication with the word demolition that was included last time. Demolition, in the sense we were using it, includes creating more wall, essentially adding on to existing wall to streamline it, to make the separation required for the quadplex to have 2 units down and 2 units up. This is another image, probably a little bit easier to tell, interior layout with the separation. These units, as mentioned, there will be 2 down, 2 up. Next slide. And what we have here is just an example of one of the units, a rendering of what the interior will look like. The point is that these are going to be nice. These are going to be luxury. These are going to be units that you'd be proud to have in your neighborhood. I'd like to touch on some of the more particular arguments here. The approval of this variance is not going to cause detriment to the public good. Rehabilitating a neglected building and preventing further blight is only going to benefit the surrounding area. The approval of this use variance will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the UDC, which begs the question, what is that intent and purpose? We submit that it's to streamline land use regulation, promote sustainable and organized growth that aligns with long-term community planning goals. It promotes health, safety, and welfare of the community by enforcing regulations on land use aesthetics, safety, and protecting property values. It is a comprehensive regulatory framework to guide development and land use in a way that fosters growth while maintaining the interest of the community. Next slide, please. I'd like to briefly touch on Memphis 3.0. I direct your attention to the very vision statement of Memphis 3.0. In our 3rd century, Memphis will build up, not out. Memphis will be a city that anchors growth on strengths of the core and neighborhoods, a city of greater connectivity and access. a city for opportunity for all. This plan does just that. It fosters growth in a way consistent with the long-term goals of the Memphis 3.0 plan to build up, not out, especially considering the subject property's core city designation. This is precisely the type of growth that Memphis 3.0 not only contemplates, but encourages, while also being in harmony with the UDC itself. The approval of this variance will not be injurious to the surrounding area, as mentioned before. This building has historically been occupied by tenants, and many of these neighbors were apparently blissfully ignorant of that going on in the first place. So I struggle to see how that could become an issue now when it was not before in an 8-unit building. There's adequate parking, there will be privacy enhancements along the sides and rear, and this property does exhibit, consistent with 9.22.6a, unusual characteristics in the layout of the home. Right? We've essentially got a home that was originally a single family that has been MacGyvered into such a way that we had 6 units in one house. This is going to present a serious challenge converting back to a single family. This home has long been used as multifamily, and the layout reflects that. Practical difficulties and undue hardship, this entire project would need to be reworked from the ground up should this body not grant this use variance. This is not about money, I want to be clear, but about the time and effort and energy that's already been expended in this case, and the additional time and energy that will be needed to conform to the single-family home.
All right, that's our 10 minutes. So,
thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Falk? You'll get a chance to rebut, and we'll probably have questions.
Sure.
So, okay. We're going to move to the opposition. I see Mr. Field has gotten up, so I assume he would like to speak. If Mr. Langley will let him. If you'll give your name and address for the record, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'm Porter Field. My work address is 130 North Court Avenue, and my home address is 1490 Good Bar in Central Gardens.
Okay, so I'm going to go and swear you in since you're sort of a neighbor.
Okay.
I guess, if that's okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I want to point out, this is a redo of 2 months ago. I want to point out procedurally, I believe the board may be slightly beyond its own authority by granting a second motion based on what it did last time. We were not able to speak at the rehearing. The rehearing allows a rehearing based on a mistake of fact or law, and that was not what was decided. It was decided just based on the unfairness of 5 board members being present, and I would suggest that this body should deny the application solely on that basis. Now, let me address some of the facts. Yes, I was very impressed with the advertisements for this property going back to the 30s. In the 1930s, there were a lot of rooming houses all over Memphis, including all over Central Gardens. The zoning code came in to address a uniform property use. As the rooming house uses went out of fashion after being empty a year, they have to come back into compliance with the R6 zoning. There are almost no rooming houses still in existence in Central Gardens. This may be the last physical building that has any remnant of a rooming house in Central Gardens. It is completely consistent. The intended use needs to come into compliance with R6. And it's clear that it's not in compliance with R6. R6 does not allow for apartment uses on a residential street. This has a residential house next door, a residential house on the other side, a residential house directly across the street, a residential house across the alley behind it. It is just not, there's nothing about this application that remains in compliance with the R6 zoning requirements. Secondly, there's been no showing of a hardship. There are several things. Another one of our speakers is going to delve into 9.22, but there's no showing of a hardship or by the configuration of the building, they cannot use it in compliance with R6. The Campesino Ritchie family lived in this house from 1952 until 2018. And always during that time, it was occupied and used in part in renting out other properties, but always as a single family residence with Campesino Ritchie's living in the residence. Dr. Ahn purchased the property in 2018 and he agreed before this body to use it still in compliance with R6. There's never been a time in the use of this property that it has not been used in compliance with the R6 zoning code. This would be an extension, a new use, in essence, a zoning change to allow a new use that had never been there before, if you grant this application. It's just the code does not allow a decision to approve this. That's beyond the scope of the authority given to this body. I want to talk about Memphis 3.0. There was a lot of talk about it. Certainly the staff, Ms. Christian mentioned that it is in compliance with 3.0. I pointed out in my submission on page 74 of Memphis 3.0, there are two locations that Memphis 3.0 would support infill buildings, infill housing. Within 100 feet of an anchor, which this is not, or on an avenue or boulevard, which this is not. Memphis 3.0 does not stand for the proposition that multifamily housing will be located inside of every neighborhood. It stands for the proposition that where appropriate, we will build up. And those appropriate locations are specifically identified in Memphis 3.0 as within 100 feet of an anchor, like a core business. The closest anchor to this property is the corner of McLean and Union, which is probably 3/4 of a mile away. Or on avenues and boulevards. Boulevards are big roads with medians in them. Carr is a residential street with residences on both sides. Memphis 3.0 would not support multifamily housing at this location. Now, Your Honor, I want to reserve the rest of my time in the event there's any at the end of the 10 minutes, and I may come back up and address. I'd like to turn it over to some of the other speakers and certainly to some of the residents. I want to point out one other thing. There are 29 complaints or submissions. 27 of them were by Carr Avenue residents and others that are opposed to this. 2 were in support of it, and both were made by the applicant themselves. The community does not want this. It does not comply with community standards, and we're urging you to vote against the application. Thank you.
Real quick, does anybody have a question for Mr. Field?
A quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
As far as the other council applicant showed us advertisement for Carr for Unit 2 and 6. Were you aware of anything, or were your clients aware of any advertisement of the units?
I don't know, Your Honor. There are several neighbors that are here that will speak that have lived there a long time. They were aware that the Casavino Ritchie family rented out occasional units. Now 99% of them, which you're going to hear directly from the witnesses who have personal knowledge, were to other family members who had fallen on hard times and just they split up the residence to they weren't their children, they were their cousins and whatnot. Most of them were related to the owners of the residence. But what's important, I would suggest about that, is that during the entire time period, the Casavinos, Ritchies lived in the residence. The owners lived in the home. It'd be like if you rented out a spare room to someone that was in need of a room. It was not, I guess that's what a rooming house is. I mean, if you want to rent out one of your rooms, you've got a spare space, you can rent it out to somebody. In this case, it was almost always people that were related, and they maintained living in the house. And I would suggest that qualifies within R6. If you can have up to 4 unrelated individuals living in a residence and still comply with the definition of residential property for the purposes of R6. That's like if you have 4 college students renting out a house somewhere. If they have 5, technically that requires a different zoning designation. But for 4 of them, you can just rent out a house and you can stay in the bedrooms and share a kitchen, and that still is a residential use. But more than that requires a different zoning designation. At all times from 1952 until today, this property has been used in compliance with R6. And again, as I said previously, this would be an extension in a new direction, allowing a new use that has not been there before. Does that address your question? Yes, ma'am.
You made one statement that lends this question. You mentioned sharing a kitchen, which was a big component of what makes that a kind of, a R6 group home type configuration. What makes this a little different is the fact that this home has 6 individual kitchens. which leads me to think that there wasn't a lot of sharing between the individuals who were renting the space.
Well, Your Honor, of course, I can't go back and talk from a personal knowledge on that. But I will say that I observed the pictures that Mr. Falk put up on the screen, and I thought they were very telling. And I also saw the numbers on the doors. I mean, I'm not saying that this never was used in some sort of designation. They had a designation for the rooms. I don't have numbers on my doors in my house. But I don't think it's fair to say that is going to be an impediment to development to a use that's consistent with R6. I live in Midtown. I don't know how many of these board members, how many of y'all live in Midtown, but there are a lot of strange spaces in my house. I have one room that has murals on all 4 walls and the ceiling from an artist that lived in my house before. There are a lot of unusual features in Midtown houses, and this one would be no different if it was turned into a single-family residence. Those kitchens didn't look like, Viking-inspired, just put in brand-new kitchens. They look like rooms that had been kitchens in the past. You rip out the cabinets, and then there's not a kitchen anymore. I mean, those, I saw the photographs, and I understand your question, but I don't think that would be an impediment to bringing this house into compliance with R6. And Mr. Campbell, I want to point out that this house has been vacant for more than a year. That any benefit from the illegal use or the prior use to the zoning code has expired. That the new use either has to come fully into compliance with R6, or it has to qualify under 9.22 for a variance or a zoning change under a different set of codes. None of those apply here, and that is why this should be denied.
Okay. Other questions before we move on? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Langley, if you'll give your name and address, I'm going to swear you in too, because I know you live
These are statutes
close.
in the code section. I'll pass them out.
Perfect. And I think we have like 5 minutes and 50 seconds.
Okay,
On the clock.
and I don't want to take up more than 2 minutes because I want to let some of the other neighbors speak. So if you would shut me down if we get past 2 minutes.
We can do that.
And you want me to go ahead and state my name on the record for?
Yeah, go ahead and name and address, and I'll swear you in.
Sure. Adam Langley. I am at 1742 Central. I'm also speaking not as an attorney. I am an attorney, but not speaking as an attorney, as a board member for the Landmark Committee of the Central Gardens Association and the Central Gardens Association in opposition to this.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so be God?
I do.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so today we are talking about the legal use of property, not just the use of property, however it's been cavalierly used in the past. We're talking about the legal use as allowed under the UDC and under Tennessee law. And section 9.22 does allow for use variances. And under section A of 9.221, it says the Board of Adjustment may vary certain requirements of this development code. That's not what we're here to do today. We're not talking about setbacks, building heights, those type of things. Here we're talking about the complete use of the property from single family to multifamily use. Can that be allowed under the development code? So under B, it says the Board of Adjustment shall have authority to vary the standards of this development code. And vary the standards is very different than change the standards. Change the standards, change the zoning is a zoning change under section 9.5. That is never going to come before you because that is a land use control board item and something that could ultimately go to the city council. That is not what is being proposed here. That should not be allowed here, which is a change from single-family use to multifamily use, a change in zoning, not varying the standards, not varying the requirements, but a change in zoning. It shouldn't be before you. It got correctly denied the first time. So what we're being asked to do today, you're being asked to do today, is under 922.3, is meet a burden of proof. The applicant's got to prove that they have unusual circumstances, undue hardship, and that this property cannot be used as a single-family residence. That's the one question you need to ask yourself. Can this property be used as a single-family residence? If the answer is yes, You must deny that. And I say that must because you're not acting as a legislative body. You're not the city council. You're not the land use control board making a zoning change decision. You're the Board of Adjustment making a judicial decision that then gets appealed to the Chancery Court if there's disagreement about it. So you have to look at the code sections and the applicant and see if the burden of proof has been met. And then you have to make specific written findings that each of those burdens has been met. On page 15 of the staff report, the staff report basically just skips over. It says they didn't answer this. They're going to beautify the property. None of that gets to undue hardship, unusual circumstances, and none of it shows that this single family use couldn't exist.
It's been 2 minutes. You can keep going as long as you want.
Okay, give me 30 seconds so I can get to 2 minutes is a little bit of time. So what I want to get to effectively is to show that there is a requirement for unusual circumstances. And what is important to do is unusual circumstances as to the lot, the physical characteristics of the lot, not the built structure. There are different requirements for the structure. That would be a change in the requirements. That's not what you're here to do today. It's a change in the physical characteristics of the lot. The second sheet of paper I gave you today was the actual state law that this UDC is based on, and they're all physical characteristics of the lot. There are nothing unique about this lot. It's a common square rectangular lot in Central Gardens that's been used for over 100 years. The fact that this has been used as a single family residence forever is indicating that it can still be used as a single family residence. And I am going to conclude there. I would like to address the two questions that were asked to Mr. Field, but I will respect the board on how it wants to go about that.
Are there any questions for Mr. Langley? I have a quick question. Just you're talking about the lot, so I'm looking at your handout on the back of the UDC page where it talks about the use variance. It does mention that the last thing, or to any physical improvements made upon the property. So wouldn't that be the structure?
It is not. So actually it's section 1.33C2 of the UDC. Physical improvements is defined as clearing and grading, water and sewer footings and foundations and similar like items. And structure is actually defined to be a built structure above the foundation in the definitional section of the UDC. So there is actually a real clear distinction between physical improvements and a built structure. Those are definitional terms.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I got a few people, and we got about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Is there somebody that wants to volunteer? You want me to call a name? We got a volunteer. If you'll give your name and address for the record.
Yes, sir. I'm Kathy Ferguson. I'm at 1380 Carr Avenue.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So I came and spoke the last time when this variance was objected to, more to speak to my relationship with the Ritchie family and what I knew about the home. I'm here to reiterate that those things are still true. My husband and son and I have been on the block for 16 years. I've had some glasses of wine in that house. I've walked through the home with Gina and Carla Ritchie. I think that the applicant's description of the dwellings being MacGyvered is actually very appropriate. It was certainly done kind of haphazardly, and as I said before, Gina Ritchie, the daughter, Carla, her sister, Mrs. Ritchie, her mother, all had separate dwelling spaces in the home, and to call those what we're calling kitchens, real kitchens, I would have called them kitchenettes. I mean, it was very, very basic stuff. There was a kitchen that was upstairs that I recall being Carla's kitchen that had a very large table where the family would go and have dinners together. And what is new information since I was here last time is that I did speak to Gina Ritchie, who I consider a friend, who sold the home. We pleaded for Gina to at least write a letter or to be here to speak on the neighbor's behalf. I don't want to put words in her mouth, so what I'm telling you is how I feel about what she said to me, which is I think that she and her sister are not happy with the position that her neighbors are in this, and I think they want to just see this thing go away. I think that they're a little bit embarrassed. Gina did say to me these words, my sister and I had a conversation, and we wish we would have never sold that darn house so that you guys would not be in this position. She said to me, that was my family home. We lived there. That was my house. Now, as Mr. Field represented, looking at those, I've gone through the old newspapers and can see how many times, rooms were rented in my house back when that was done in Central Gardens. If there was something after 2000, I'm sure that would have been a room that might have been rented in the back house, which again, comes over the 4 unrelated people can be under household, and I could rent out, my back house if I wanted to. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a complete zoning change on my block. And I don't like being told that I am ignorant or that I've not told the truth. I was in that home. I've spoken to Gina Ritchie. That was their family home. And we would like for you guys to vote stay to make sure that it stays a single family home. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Ferguson?
I'm sorry.
Well, no questions. Thank you. We have 4 seconds left. So there's not really much time to do anything. And we probably didn't start the clocks when we were supposed to, so I think we're kind of done. We're going to move back to, we have 2 minutes for rebuttal from Mr. Falk or the applicant.
Yes, I'd just like to quickly address a couple of things. One, maybe I don't know the exact definition of a kitchenette, but I would imagine that a gas stove would probably go beyond that when it's coming out of the wall. As far as the 2 units that were advertised in 2021, if the board recalls, those were units 1 and 6, both of which were in the main house. The 2 in the back that would make it 8, I can't say for certain, but it seems like it's been a number of years before anyone has been able to live there. To speak of the illegal use, it's certainly possible, even probable, that this was used illegally, not by Oro Investments. In my understanding, Oro Investments has not used this property in a way that violates the UDC because they have not completed any projects and are now here trying to smooth this out and get clarity. To take the temperature down just a little bit, I apologize if I inadvertently insinuated that neighbors are lying. That is not what I mean lying. I just think they may not have all the facts. While certain members of the community may have walked through the house from time to time, I fail to see how they could have walked through all without the landlord giving 24 hours notice to the tenants. Further, the owners, sure, they lived in that house all those years. Not all the house, part of the house certainly, but not all of the house. For the foregoing reasons, we respectfully request that this board grant our use variance so that this decrepit property can be rehabilitated consistent with the Memphis 3.0 plan. Thank you very much.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Falk? Go ahead, Mr. Love.
Thank you, Mr. Falk, for the presentation and providing us with information on your project. Did your client understand the zoning of the site before he purchased it?
He was not aware that this was zoned single-family residential. I imagine if he had known, he would not have purchased it with this and come up with this plan to make it a quadplex.
Okay. Secondly, does your client intend on separating the electric meters and the water meters for the site?
If you give me one moment to confer. Yes.
So there are, and I'm sorry, I can't make out from the plans, they're a little small and my eyes are a little bad, but how many bedrooms are upstairs?
Two bedrooms with 2 apartments and 2 with 1. I am turning to the interior plans.
There's 4 bedrooms upstairs.
4 up and 2 down?
Yes.
Okay. And then lastly, in regards to the circulation of the cars in that driveway, is this drawn up in such a way that you're able to see turning radiuses and make sure that cars can go and come and leave in forward motion?
Yes, it was. It's been designed in a way to maintain a central pathway by which a vehicle can get in and out unimpeded by the other parked vehicles.
And each of these cars can leave in forward motion?
I'm sorry?
these cars can leave in forward motion, meaning they don't have to bag out from the back of the site.
Absolutely, they have front
into
and
the
rear
public
egress.
right of way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions? I'm looking at the bedrooms again. I just want to make sure we said it right. I count two two-bedrooms. Two bedrooms. It looks like they're on the west side of the house. And then the two one-bedrooms are both on the east side. So the one bedroom upstairs and one bedroom downstairs, then they kind of mirror each other a little bit, is what I'm seeing. So, just to be clear. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Falk. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
With that, if we could get a motion to approve. Yes, sir.
Question.
Yeah.
Can we show by the show of hands how many people are in opposition to this case? Thank you.
Okay. If we get a motion to approve BOA 2024-62 as conditioned by staff.
Move to approve.
All right, moved in second. Is there any discussion?
I mean, no new discussion, unless we want to rehash it.
My mind has not changed from the way I voted before. I think that with this being a use variance, that this property is in disrepair. If you start looking at the layouts, there's new kitchens going where there was bathrooms before, there was stuff like that. It's not like we're just taking a kitchen and making the same kitchen there. It's a totally new thing. And so I just don't see that they are meeting the use variance requirement of it can't be used as a single family residence with all the work that's going into it. So I'm gonna vote against this.
And I think I'm on the opposite spectrum with the thought that I think it was originally 6 kitchens, right?
If you call them that.
Yeah, whatever they were. And we are reducing to 4 now, which will require some rework, regardless of the location. When I look at historical significance of a property, I'm looking at the overall property. I'm looking at, is there anything that's being done to the exterior that's gonna cause, harm to the neighborhood, which I do not see. I see that we are using a lot of linguistics and, yes, by default it was an R6, but it was totally used for the purposes of tenants and rental capacities throughout the years. I mean, given the advertisements we saw. So, and then again, the house is falling apart with no real interest prior to this to purchasing it as a single family home. So that is why I'm still kind of in favor of it, just because regardless of whether it's being used for true multifamily, I don't think we're doing anything to cause harm, which is more people being added to the property than you can make the case were being added when it was being used in its previous usage. So we gave a pass to the Ritchie family for doing the exact same thing. Maybe it's relationships, maybe it was because it was been done for so long, but in practice, we're not doing anything different than what was done previously. So that's my stance, and obviously it's going to come down to a count.
I have a question too. Are there any other multifamily of this style on or in the neighborhood?
Well, I remember from last time, there are some multifamily that aren't far, but they're not in this historic district here. So like, if you go west.
I'm gonna pull up the land use map on the zoning atlas and it will show the Central Gardens neighborhood and where the multifamily units are located.
That would be helpful, thank you.
And Your Honor, I'd ask to address that map on behalf of the Central Gardens Association.
Public hearing has been closed.
We'll look at it and then we'll have to decide if we want to hear any more testimony because we're already in discussion.
It's also on page 6 of the staff.
Yeah, so I'm looking at that. I'll share with you, Ms. Jim. So there is multifamily, but the neighborhood is actually there. Yeah, that's actually it. Seems seamless, but it's a different area with different.
So on the other side of the street, basically.
Yeah, it's right at the edge, but it's a different neighborhood. You see all the brown over there. I remember there being, whether it's right or not, there was testimony that that's what keeps our values higher, is not having multifamily.
So
Whether
if
that's-
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, if I can bring your attention to the screen here, this area is indicated as the Central Gardens Historic District, and you can see that there are some multifamily properties in the area. The subject property, 1360 Carr, is here. The distinction between Central Gardens and Annisdale Park is essentially through this way. So Annisdale Park is on the left-hand side.
Right.
Other thoughts?
I think most of us was here last time.
Well, we have two that were not. Yeah. If that's all who was here, I know. Mary was here.
On the kitchen station, now I know we have, well, currently 6 designated as kitchens. We're moving to 4, but we're changing the bathroom.
Oh, what I was saying? I was looking at just the site plans that were in the staff report. We have existing second floor. Let me see what page that was on. Yeah. Chloe, can you get us to page 13 and 14 of the staff report? Yeah, it's you had to guess on things to get there. So I'll tell you, I'll kind of show you what I was looking at when I came up with what I was saying. Yeah, go to page 13. So you can see the 2 kitchens. There's one right about, show the kitchen on the, you're almost on it, that kitchen there. It's, yeah, just above you. That before was maybe a kitchen, but also had like 2 closets. They were to the left side of it, right there. And then you look at the kitchen, new kitchen number 2, that's just kind of go up, yeah, right there. I mean, if you even see where that wall is, that wasn't even a wall before. Like, so it looks like maybe it was a kitchen in the far left where it shows that kind of maybe a countertop, maybe.
Okay.
But that's not where the plumbing is. That's not where that is. I mean, these are gutted kitchens. This isn't, oh, we need to change a countertop. And it's similar to that on the second floor. As you, at least when I was looking, that's what I was looking at. Maybe you got the kitchen that's in the, I'm going to call it the northeast corner of the floor. But that was like maybe there's a little kitchen there on the other side. There was a wall that's not there now. I mean, there's multiple walls we're taking out. We're moving walls over. We're changing this. And then the bathroom on the left-hand side that's closest to the front of the house, that's now where a kitchen is. So I'm just looking at it saying, like, I don't see that, it's not like we're taking a kitchen and putting a kitchen in. We're taking, you know, maybe it was used as something else, but we're really changing the structure. And that's where I think we fail on this under the use variance of that the structure is so significant. We're changing all the insides. We're gutting it.
But
We can do anything we want there now.
I guess the point I'm making is to get this back to a single-family home with rooms that make sense, I think you're going to be doing an equally amount of demo.
Exactly. So why not do it? And then it fits, you don't get a variance. Like that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't disagree one bit. You might as well.
Yeah, I get that. I'm just looking at precedent uses and continuation of precedent uses.
They've been over for years. I mean, there's all those little things that we were supposed to see aren't there. Now, in a vacuum, not talking about R6, do I think what they're doing looks pretty neat and kind of a neat way to do that house? Absolutely. I just don't think I have the power to vote for it, is my problem. Not that the plan's bad, because the plan's it's pretty cool, but I don't think it fits with what we're allowed to decide.
So are you saying because it is, you're thinking repositioning or the volume of is changing the use?
I don't think we care about that because it's been too long on the use. I think when we're looking at a use variance, we need to find that none of the other uses permitted on the property are practical. Well, anything's practical, we're gutting it. And then due to either unusual characteristics found to apply in subsection A1, which is like the property, or physical improvements. Now, I took that as the house. There's testimony that physical improvements just means the grading of the lot. But even taking the most wide thing of looking at the house, I think that if we're gonna gut it, then I don't care. Like we're not keeping what's there, except for the very outside. So it could go back to being just like the neighbor's house, which is single family.
I mean, I think there are a few projects that will pass that distinction. You know, money can buy anything. You know, enough money can make anything to a point where it meets that requirement. And this is no different. You know, honestly, I think making it a single family would be harder than making it multifamily.
Look on the left side and all those dark line walls that are going away to be replaced with different walls. The entire, almost every wall on that top floor in the middle there is being taken out and moved in some way. Mr. Love.
Just to add, Mr. Chair, as we look at the construction, and I'm in alignment with what you're thinking, but just to talk a little bit about the infrastructure of the house, if we're looking at what things need to be done to convert this single-family structure into a multifamily structure, the electrical and the plumbing to convert this site are going to be extensive. I think on that alone, we could say that this is a complete conversion. If we're talking about multiple kitchens, we're talking about drains, supply lines, and I'm sure that whatever electrical design is existing in this house now is a single-family residence. That's going to change drastically to do what the applicant's looking to do. My sympathies go to the applicant. I understand where you were heading with this project from an investment perspective, and I agree with our chairman that on the grounds of the design itself, this is exactly the kind of thing that we like to see within the core city. So we do build up and not out. I just think that there's a lack of evidence that shows that this can't be used as a single-family residence. That's my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other thoughts?
Those were good questions that should have been asked during testimony. Is how much electrical, or would there be even
saw multiple panels outside. I mean, so something is clearly already.
Well, where are you gonna run it? I mean, all the walls are going away. You're running new electrical.
If we
No, I was
could,
just talking about the.
Yeah.
if we could just talk into the microphones.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Our attorney
Yeah,
is
sorry about
reminding us to make sure we're talking into them.
We got all the pictures up there, and you put the microphone in front. All right, any other thoughts?
Well, I'll just add in, thank you guys for that discussion, because I was really at a loss at the beginning. I understand both sides and, didn't know, it was going to be tough to make a decision. But, we start with what uses are permitted now. And then we can deviate from that if there's, difficulty or challenge or reason that you cannot get there. And so, it seems like, the effort it would take to stick to the use that we have now is about the same as it's going to take to do anything different. It's not, it's not, from listening to you guys, it seems like it's not going to be any more difficult to make it to revert back to a single family house than for some other use that's not permitted. So that helped me to still thinking it through, but that helped me give me a framework to think from.
Yeah. And like I said, I think it's really neat. I just don't think we can do it.
I think for me now, my struggle, of course, is still the distinction of, I think it was still separate. That's just me. But my mindset is we do have to adhere to the practical difficulty and the unusual characteristics. I think I didn't see or hear enough evidence to make that argument for me to, although I voted last time. But again, I have to really abide by the UDC, not that I didn't before, but with current evidence and discussion, again, and enlightenment on the level of construction and work. It's a lot going into it. But to your point, the same effort would be if we were upgrading the rooms to make it a 6-bedroom home. I guess that's just, I'm still toiling.
I totally get it. My only question is, a home in Central Gardens, why did it sit being dilapidated for so long?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no interest in it, then somebody comes with a plan to make it beautiful, to beautify the neighborhood, to not have an eyesore, which is not modifying the exterior in no way. It's still gonna have the historical significance. So I think I hear both sides, and I know there's obviously good arguments and discussion on both sides, but I can't get over that piece. I mean, there's a few things that I can't get over, that being one of them, that somebody is putting money back into this to make it back beautiful, and then the other piece, which is the precedence of how it was previously being used and the acceptance of that previous use from an objection standpoint.
I agree.
So,
I mean, I totally agree with you that it has been used as to me, as an apartment rental.
Yeah.
Room, house, whatever you want to call it, obviously with locks and doors. But we do have a gap in time. Testimony was given that it was a gap of time, which brings us back to the UDC. Had it been last year or 6 months ago, I probably would stand on my stand that it needs to be this. But because there is a gap of time of whatever illegal use, I'll just call it that, that brings us back to the UDC of having to revert back to the R6. And I did not hear enough to push me back over on the practical difficulty of the property.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think that not knowing everything about it, they sold it in 2018. The family did. And if you look up like on Redfin or whatever, pictures look a lot better than they do now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, oh, wow, I want to, but, there's like livable spaces in there.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know if because, did Dr. Ron start something? And so it looks partially bad, not just from dilapidation, but like hey, we started demo to do this and found out we couldn't do it. I mean, but it definitely looks worse than it. I'm assuming those pictures were on that sale in 2018. But, and for why it hadn't sold, most people don't want a project. They want a finished house. And so, but it is a big project. Either way you look at it, it's a big one. It's not like, oh, we go in there and we're gonna patch and paint and make the kitchen a little nicer. It really, no matter who does whatever here, it's a big project.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking.
On a great house. Because I mean, the outside looks, I'm sure it can use some work, but it's got great bones. It's a cool looking house in Midtown. Any other comments before we vote?
I just fear the new owner does nothing to it now. Because, I mean, the cost to renovate that, and then the cost to renovate it, and probably the turnaround, I mean, it's not gonna offset it.
Yeah.
So he can sit on it and do nothing, and then we got a bigger problem with a house in the neighborhood that is continuing to drag it. But anyway, that's another discussion.
Yeah.
But those are the things I think about when.
Sure, no, I get it. Sometimes we want something rather than nothing.
Yeah.
Some good thing, and we don't think we can get the great thing, so let's get a good thing.
Yeah.
But
And the good point is he can still convert it to a single-family home, right?
We've been told money's not the issue, so we'll see. All right, if we can get a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Bruce?
How are we voting? Are we voting in the?
If you vote yes, you're voting for the apartments or whatever, the 4 units. If you vote no, then the variance is just denied. Okay. All right, go ahead, Mr. Menzies.
This is tough. I don't feel strongly one way or the other, but I vote no.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Love?
No.
Ms. Conrad?
No.
Vice Chair Savage Selden?
Campbell did not help me. It's such a beautiful neighborhood. I'm gonna say yes. If I understand the UDC will be met, will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Rainey?
Okay, I'm gonna vote no, and I find the standards are not being met and would be unduly detrimental to the property. Okay, so motion fails, so there's no variance on that today. Thank you all for your patience and coming down today. I know that we have strong feelings all around, but you've all been to have a big group and not have any outbursts is always nice for the board. So, and if we got one more case we're gonna hear, so if y'all can maybe talk once you get to the hallway, I'd appreciate it. Mr. Penzis, will you call our next case? Okay.
Item number 15, BOA 2024-65 at 1562 Valentine Avenue.
All right, this is a petition for rehearing. You can come on down to the front, ma'am.
It's a matter of how we voted.
And again,
Thank you. We couldn't hear what you were saying.
You don't have a seat, but yeah, as y'all leave, if you'll talk outside in the lobby.
Okay. We couldn't hear what you were saying.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so what we have before us is a petition for rehearing, and I need to pull it up real quick. Give me 1 second. And so with a petition for rehearing, we can do this a couple ways. One, we don't have to hear any testimony. We can just decide if we want to rehear that case. This is the case that was on Valentine, had the connected ADU that was built out that we allowed to happen. The applicants put forth, the opposition has asked for a rehearing. So we can, and Ms. Hull can jump in at any time she wants to explain this. She's probably better at it than me. We can ask for testimony just on the rehearing, whether we should have one or not. That's really all we're hearing. We are not hearing the case again. Or we can talk amongst ourselves based on the petition and decide whether or not we want to rehear this case. Would you have anything to add to that, Ms. Hall?
No.
Okay.
Can we get a refresher of what this case was? I don't remember this case.
We don't have to hear even a case on it. We can just discuss and vote whether or not we want to hear the case again. Because we got the staff report already that we've reviewed. And it's whether or not we found that enough,
To rehear.
to rehear. Any thoughts on if we need to hear testimony? I'll give my thoughts. I thought that this case was different than the car case on what in the last one, the applicant, although I didn't necessarily agree with them, was saying, hey, we got some other things, or y'all didn't hear us right, or something like this. They've said we've erred on things, but it's all things that I think that I fully understood. So I don't know that I feel the need to rehear this case. But if y'all wanted to hear testimony, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But my gut would be not to hear testimony and not to rehear.
To rehear testimony, that would be at the next.
Well, the testimony we'd hear today is only on whether or not we should ever rehear the case. So it's
we can
really
still
just.
vote against rehearing it based on testimony, or?
Yes, the testimony would be whether or not a rehearing is merited, not on the merits themselves of the case. Like, what happened in that case that makes it where we should rehear it? What was the mistaken fact?
So do we know now why they're requesting a rehearing?
It was in the staff report. It was in their application. Okay. So I think that's towards the end. Sorry.
Oh, it's it's pages 2 and 3 of the staff report. That is the petition to rehear that was submitted.
Pull mine up as well.
I see. Okay.
Any other thoughts? I'm trying to pull up my report.
Yeah,
I recall how this one dealt. Was it same reason? Just
This one passed.
No, this was approved. This is the opposition coming to ask for a rehearing.
okay. That's what I was trying to.
Yeah.
Yes, at the last hearing, it was voted to approve 7-1.
7-1. Yeah, we've heard this. I mean, we want to go back and hear the same thing that we've heard before.
I'm not going to second guess an approval.
Okay, does anybody want any testimony? I mean, we have not the testimony, but what they gave us.
I still don't see where they.
Here, I've got the paper copy.
No, I have it on my phone. I'm just still looking as to what they felt like we erred on.
Yeah. It's just a 2-page memo telling what they think we erred on. So I guess my concern would be, are we going to open up a precedent so everybody who doesn't get the result they want will come back to us and petition us to rehear their case? I don't know that anything's changed. If we do rehear it, we'll hear the same evidence we heard before. it's probably not wise to create a precedent of rehashing territory.
We were chastised earlier today by Mr. Field to some extent at the beginning, didn't go into it too much, about one of the reasons that we talked about rehearing the other case that we just reheard was based on only having 5 people.
Right.
The last case, we had 7 and it was unanimous.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't like, ooh, maybe like minds could differ, give somebody, you know, we want to make sure things are fair. That was pretty good in that we all heard what was there. I don't see anything in here where it's like showing that there's a mistaken fact. It's more in our interpretation of the facts, which I think we've done.
Agreed. And I'm glad you brought up the point that other was 5 people. And so,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of.
So I move that we not consider rehearing this
Make
case.
the motion in an affirmative.
Oh, has a motion already been made?
No, but the motion, all
Motion
motions
to
by this
deny
board
the
shall be
rehearing?
affirmative.
Right.
So you're going to move to deny?
Move to deny the rehearing.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I see. Then we go
Okay.
back.
Thank you.
Okay, so I move to approve the rehearing.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Real quick, what is is it still a 5 or is it majority on a rehearing?
5.
All 5, okay.
So we're approving to rehear this case.
Yes, so if you do not want to rehear the case, you would say no. Because we make all motions in the affirmative. Yeah. Yeah. All right, any discussion? All right, Hannah, if you'll give us a roll call, please.
Mr. Bruce.
No.
Mr. Love.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell. Vice Chair Savage Selden.
No.
And Chair Rainey.